Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast powered by eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 25th of June and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. This is episode 31, season 8 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. Once again, we've gathered together this week's big car retailing stories across the franchised and independent sectors for you to enjoy all in one place, on demand, on your podcast feed.
Well, we have got a few shout-outs this week, but the biggest one is, can you believe it's 5 years as of the 23rd of June of this week, Curtis, that we voted to leave the EU?
I actually thought it was longer than 5 years.
I think it feels that way, doesn't it? And the fact that we're still on with stuff.
Yes, yeah, 5 years.
I was quite shocked when I saw it, in fairness, and especially when they started to replay some of the footage from you-know-who with his pint in his hand.
Yes.
Mr. Farage.
He who should not be named. But you've just named him. But yeah, whatever happened to him?
Yes, I wonder. But yeah, I think it's quite a shock when you see 5 years since that on the 23rd of June when the vote was in. And we left the EU, and we're still in negotiations and everything now happening with Ireland and things like that. But we're still here. We're still cracking on, and we've had things this week from the inflation as well, haven't we? This week,
yeah. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that. It's 5 years since Brexit, because for most of this week, I feel as I've been back in the 70s. Sort of record inflation, strikes, political chaos. Petrol prices at all-time high. Kate Bush at number one.
Yeah. Well, that's because of Stranger Things that you see.
Yeah,
but if you're watching that, but yeah.
But it does feel as though we're back in the 70s.
Yeah, you can't comprehend it, can you, at the minute? But yeah, there is a lot going on.
I've even got my flares on for this recording.
You never had them off.
Yeah, that's true.
Your wing collar, isn't it? Yeah. Showing your age now, Curtis.
Yeah. If David Billsborough is listening, he's probably got his full punk gear on. I would have thought.
He will be out on his scooter.
Yeah.
Out of his shed there. But I think one thing we do need to shout out is we had the catch up with Darren Martin with a midweek interview there with Darren, and again at the minute a lot going on around values, a lot going on in terms of performance and things. We know that the market is starting to stabilize a little bit, and there's that supply and demand imbalance, but the point was that he was talking about obviously the values seeing a more of a plateauing than a bloodbath. So don't take the headlines that you may have read, tune into the podcast because Darren does give the context behind his view of the market. So don't miss that one. It'll be on your podcast feed and still available now.
And if you'd like to get in touch with us, come on the show or send us a press release, then email us at motortraderadio@yahoo.com. You can also join the Motor Trade Radio LinkedIn group or follow us on Twitter.
So what have we got in the headlines this week? Because we have got Steve Whitten back on from Menable partway through, but interesting selection of headlines this week.
Yeah, absolutely no shortage of headlines this week. We've got spending squeeze intensifies on motorists as inflation hits 40-year high. Consumer spending on cars expected to slow, says the FLA. Used car sales for the top 200 most stocked car dealers rose in May. Virtue Motors focused on operational excellence amid car retail's H2 headwinds. Pendragon shareholders vote against directors' 2021 pay. And finally, we reveal the automotive companies with the best senior leadership.
So yeah, the first story is obviously there in the AM, and the headline is "Spending Squeeze Intensifies on Motorists as Inflation Hits a 40-year High." So, and that's reporting on the fact that this week they announced the latest inflation figure of 9.1%. and talk about as the pricing pressures forcing car buyers to think twice about their next purchase continues to intensify. And this is coming, the figures from the ONS there, the Office of National Statistics, said that the rolling 12-month figure had risen to by 1 point on April's 9% figure that published this week in June the 22nd. So, yeah, there's a lot of pressure at the minute, but it is a bit of a hard one for the government to get this balance right, isn't it?
It is, yes, and sort of as a sort of aside to this story, I was only reading this morning that there was a quote from the CBI in the Telegraph saying that recession is looming. Looming was the word that was used, and also the US Fed Reserve admits that recession is a possibility. So add that to that list of woes that you just covered, and that gives us some context for this particular story. But there's some interesting comments in here from some people in the sector, including Lisa Watson, who's the director of sales at Close Brother Motor Finance. So she says, as expected, inflation continues to rise and create further challenges for industries, including the automotive sector, with the cost of living soaring and fuel prices at record levels. Consumers continue to face pressure from all angles. And she goes on to talk about what this will mean to dealers. And she says dealers will need to maximize every option they have to stock forecourts with cars that best meet demand and use all insights and tools available to understand consumer needs in a volatile market, which I suspect most dealers listening to this today will be doing that. But
Yeah.
it's good to hear that sort of message reinforced.
Yeah, and it does cite the recently published data from eBay Motors Group that has suggested that 1 in 5 car buyers are currently putting off their next purchase as a result of the cost of living. And the story does also refer to Darren Martin, who, as I said earlier, was on the show recently talking about what's happening in the market. And he is in this interview, he does cite that he's warned retailers not to rush into making used car price cuts as a consumer demand falters. If you do reduce the price of your stock, is that going to encourage people to buy if they're holding off because of the cost of living? He doesn't think so. So yeah, a bit of a word of warning there that act too quickly on this, but we know that different businesses have different pressures and different sort of policies across their groups and how they will react to this as demand does start to ease.
Yeah, and Darren actually made a really interesting point when we spoke to him last week about holding firm on the advertised price, but yeah, there might be some wriggle room within the transaction price, and that's where, if you're going to discount, that's the place to do it, not on the sticker price.
Yeah, because you could start to drive down the
Yeah.
retail prices too quickly, and that's not good for the general market there. But sticking with AM and sticking with this sort of consumer spending, the story there refers to the latest data coming from the FLA, the Finance and Leasing Association, saying that consumer spending on cars expected to slow. Now, you and I read this story, and I'm not sure that the detail is that bad when you actually look into it, is it? I mean, it is identifying that they are expecting spending to slow, but it's from a reasonable high level where they have been spending.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So it's based on the latest data from the FLA, but which, because of the time lag, is for the month of April and the year to April. So the FLA revealed that consumer car finance new business volumes fell by 1% year on year in April. As the value of new business actually grew by 12% to just over £11 billion over the same period. So, as a result, total new business volumes were 15% higher during the first 4 months of 2022 than in the same period of last year. And that the headline talks about consumer spending on cars expected as slow. The reference to that is actually further down in the story, because it points out that the value of new business by value will grow by 11% in the first half once all the data is in for May and June. And the FLA expects that to drop to a growth of 5% in the second half of the year. So we are still talking about growth, aren't we?
We are, yeah, and again, I think with context with this, and we've mentioned it many times on the show, that it is about the year-on-year comparisons now. That, the last 2 years we've been in such an unseasonal, unprecedented marketplace that when you start doing these annual comparisons, it doesn't actually tell you the true story, does it? Because we were in periods of lockdown, we were in periods of significant recovery. So the performance really needs to go back pre-pandemic levels to get a true picture of where the market is performing. But you're right, yes, we are slowing to an expected 5% in the second half of the year compared to an 11%, but it is still a 5% growth
Yeah.
no matter what, isn't it? So yeah, I think you're right. But again, spending is slowing, but obviously, that's part of the government, that they're trying to get that balance right, aren't they? That slow that inflation down, which is a trigger of that spending that we've seen.
And talking about spending, if we head over to Car Dealer, the headline there is used car sales for top 200 most stocked car dealers rose in May. So this is based on research by Car Condor for Car Dealer, and it found that sales of used cars for the top 200 most stocked car dealers actually grew by 3.5% over the course of May. So this again is pretty encouraging news, and this is the research shows that just over 163,000 cars were sold in May. Used cars were sold in May across the various franchised independent car supermarket and on-site retailers, and this was a 3.5% rise on April's figure. So moving in the right direction there.
Yeah, and the story does sort of identify some of the businesses from across the sector there, talking about Pendragon and Evans Allshaw remained in fourth place with an average of 7,947 cars in stock, whilst Bristol Street Motors jumped from 10th in April to 5th in May with 7,831. Sytner's slipped to 6th with an average of 7,674, whereas Kazoo remained in 7th place with 7,100. And they do cite figures there from Inchcape, Car Shop, and Lookers, and a few others there. But it is interesting data from Car Condor, because they do look at the size of the dealer market in terms of rooftops, and how that is beginning to consolidate, and obviously looking at their advertised vehicles across their obviously their platforms as well. So again, this kind of does reflect on the eBay Motors market view that we spoke about recently, Curtis, doesn't it? That we've just seen that slight increase in
Yeah.
days to sell, and that slight increase in average stock levels, but not all across all of them, was it? It wasn't franchise, independent, and supermarket.
Yeah, franchise was actually had actually grown. Car supermarket was down, and independents were on a par. So this is showing the sort of movement of direction within the industry. I was also interested to see in this story that they list the best-selling used car, which was the Ford Fiesta, which we've now covered
Yeah.
every week for the last 3 weeks. The Ford
Yeah.
Fiesta, because it's obviously disappeared from the news sellers, but that was the best-selling used car, whilst the fastest-selling used car was the Nissan Note, and it had previously been the MG3. There is actually a full listing on the car dealer website. You've got to be a member of the car dealer website, but definitely worth heading over there and registering and finding out how the various businesses did over the course of May.
Yeah, and interesting you mentioned the Fiesta there, Curtis, because I think there's a news story that's hit this week as well that we haven't got on here about the Ford Focus. maybe coming to the end of its life as Ford focus on the EV market. So, sadly, on the back of the order bank being shut on Ford Fiesta, and I suppose the question is out there whether it will be opened again, especially when there is talk of the Ford Focus now ending its build as well. So yeah, lots going on in that manufacturing market.
Yeah, interesting, because last week we did actually speculate on the future of the Ford Focus, so we were clearly in the loop.
Yeah. Obviously, somebody's listening.
Yes. So you're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed. And now, here's our regular Men-Able moment from our very own automotive well-being guru, Steve Whitten, who is in full levitating mode.
Hi Phil, hi Curtis, hope you're well. Yeah, another Men-Able moments. And listen to that. Silence. Or near enough. It's quiet. The last couple of Men-Able moments, I've been in the hustle and bustle of trade shows. The Garage and Body Shop show last time, and the one before that was that water cooler event down in London. But this time, I'm having a spiritual day, Phil, you'll be glad to know. And I'm actually levitating around my flat as we speak in my white linen suit with the joss sticks burning, and try to keep a straight face while I'm talking through all of that, because clearly I'm not. Just for your benefit, that really, Phil. But anyway, I wanted to give a couple of shout outs this week. Firstly to Chris Wiseman, again, down at Wessex Garages. I know he is an absolute fan of Motor Trade Radio podcast, and he listens every week. And so I wanted to give him a shout out because they're one of our great members, platinum member, and he's done some brilliant stuff recently with us, and we've got some fantastic things going on there. So I wanted to give him a shout out. Secondly, to Danny Minshall, who I also know is listening, because I had a call with him the other day, and he was telling me that he listens every week, and normally while he's on a run on a Saturday morning, and he loves the Men-Able moments, and it just makes him stop and reflect for a few minutes. So just want to say hi to Danny, and hope you're enjoying your run and the weather's being kind to you and all of that stuff. But the key thing I also want to do today is mention something a little bit serious. Not that they're not serious normally, but something that for me is kind of not sitting comfortably. I'll tell you what it is. I've started doing a lot of talks, and I'm having to put a bit of a warning at the beginning to say, we're going to talk about mental health and we're going to talk about well-being. Now, when you do that, it is going to trigger some thoughts and some memories and some situations that you may have pushed to the side, or you'd perhaps not rather look at or consider again or whatever. And that's kind of the point, really, because I'm aware that there are some managers out there in our industry, and I've got some first-hand experience of this, who shy away from conversations about mental health and well-being. And what they'd rather do is go down the route of, attending a course that just gives them some well-being awareness or whatever, without really tackling the fundamental issue. And that is that, for whatever reason, and I'm not having a dig, they don't have the empathy or the emotional intelligence. And what worries me is if I've got managers saying, I don't want to attend that because it's going to trigger some emotions, then the fear for me is, well, how are you going to be if your member of staff comes to you and opens up about something that you weren't expecting, or that triggers some thoughts and feelings for you, or that actually maybe it doesn't trigger anything and you've got no reference point for what they're talking about, and therefore struggle with the empathy and the understanding. So I really wanted to flag that up, because I think across our industry, that's one of the things we've got a bit of a challenge on. And I know that last time I mentioned about gaining and retaining and sustaining great staff. And I see more and more blog posts and LinkedIn posts over the last couple of weeks talking about, people leaving the industry. And I can't help feeling that we've got to address this issue. Now, that's come to the fore this week for me because I've actually had a couple of inquiries for people who knew me from the past in terms of my sales and management training. And somebody rang me and wanted to talk about some management training for some fairly newly promoted managers that they've got. And actually said, do you still do that stuff? And I said, yeah, absolutely do. But with a difference. And the difference is that there's a mental health angle to it. And this person, a leader in an automotive business, went, oh, thank God for that, because that's actually another part of our issue, is that our managers not only need training in how to manage people, but when they've got staff members who are having issues with their mental health, they don't know what to do or where to go. And I went, perfect. That's exactly up our street. And hats off to them for raising that. Now, the second inquiry was actually about sales training. And bizarrely, I had the more or less same conversation. Because my view on that is that if sales teams aren't selling to their optimum, then we can beat them over the head with a sticky stick all day long. And we've probably all done a bit of that. And we can dangle carrots. And we've all done a bit of that. But actually, could there be stuff going on in their own lives that's projecting into the workplace, and therefore they're not performing as you might expect? After all, when people feel good about themselves, they perform well. So if you're asking your service advisors to sell more red work and they're not, it could be because they're stressed off the clock and they've got stuff going on at home and stresses and strains in the business that actually, to be fair, they don't necessarily have the capacity to now start picking up the phone and selling that extra set of brake pads or whatever it might be. So that's a very broad brush sort of statement on all of that, but I just wanted to use Menable Moments this time to just say, you know, we are getting there, we're making huge strides, but there are still some challenges across our industry in terms of management, in terms of their empathy and their emotional intelligence. And again, that's not a criticism, that's an observation, and there are tools and things that we can use out there to help with that. And also, when we're talking about getting back to performance, you know, we mentioned last time about the cost of living increase, and none of us are immune to that. And if you've got people in your business that are mindful of that, stressful, anxious about it, it is going to affect their performance. And as a manager and a leader, we really need some extra empathy and some emotional intelligence to deal with that. So, there. Phew, I've said it. Anyway, you know how to get hold of me. You might find me on LinkedIn occasionally at Stephen J. Whitten, or you can contact me directly on action@Menable. So, leave that with you guys. I'm going to go back off and light some more joss.
Well, Phil, having been back to the 70s earlier in the show, I think we've gone right back to the 60s now. Joss sticks, levitating, feeling mellow.
Yeah. It's it was full form there, wasn't it?
Yeah. And obviously, Stephen made some important points there about leadership and empathy. If you want to email Stephen, you can do at stephen.witten@menable.org, and that's Stephen with a PH, or visit the Menable website at menable.org.
Yeah, he was certainly on form on that one, wasn't he? I can see a new avatar coming
Yes.
for the podcast Menable Moments social feeds there, as we sort of visage Steve there floating with his gown and joss sticks on everything else. But yeah, no, good food for thought there, as always, from Steve. So thank you for that, Steve. And he does give a shout out there to Danny. And I know, Danny, I've mentioned to Steve that you're welcome to come on the podcast. Just give us a shout when you're ready, and it'd be great to have a chat with you and see what you've been doing, what you're all about, etc., etc. So yeah, please do reach out.
Yeah, and it's good to hear that Danny's listening to us on his morning run. So
Yes.
I hope it's going well.
Definitely. Although it sounds like he'll probably go home and have a chill out and listen to some
Yes,
soothing music after
like
his
some
run.
joss sticks.
Yes. So returning to AM Online, and this is a couple of stories here from about Virtue. So Virtue Motors focused on operational excellence amid car retailers H2 headwinds. So there is a here from Robert Forrester and the Virtue. Obviously, they've been at the AGM trading update recently in May. That they obviously talked about their year-end announcement results, but saying that the market outlook remains unclear due to uncertainty of consumer demand and vehicle supply, although new vehicle supply is anticipated to improve gradually in the months ahead. So yeah, it's they will still talk about this sort of significant decline in like-for-like used car volumes in May.
Yeah. Now, we talk a lot about used car volumes, and indeed we have on the show because we've only just looked at the top 200. But interesting what they're saying about new car supply easing. I saw an interview with Peter Smythe on Auto Retail Network,
Mm.
where he was saying very similar things about supply looking a little bit better from October onwards. So, there is there are some encouraging signs there for new car supply. So, yeah, as you say, trading statement here. It's hot on the heels of record results that were published recently by Virtue. And within the trading statement, it says the group has had a strong start to the financial year, but it is premature at this stage to indicate any changes to market expectations of the full year trading profits. And it goes on to say management remains focused on the delivery of operational excellence around cost, conversion, and customer experience. In addition, the group continues to evaluate and execute acquisition opportunities as it seeks to deliver its core strategic objective of growth. So I think Virtue very clearly signaling what they're doing at the moment in terms of keeping a grip on operational opportunities to keep costs down, but it's still looking at acquisitions. So some interesting insights there.
Yeah, no, agree. I mean, when he was on good form recently, when we had that exclusive interview with Robert and some of those areas that he was focusing on as a business, and like I say, that operational excellence, keeping a control of that side of things, and I think it's quite a detailed report here from AM because they do look at a little sort of the latest results at the AGM, and then obviously post the AGM that they talked about another 3 million share buyback program was announced, which will run to the end of 2023 at the latest. And they've been talking obviously that they talked to Zeus Capital and said that Virtue stock should be on the rise despite the current market uncertainty. And it said that Virtue now trades at 7.1 times profit. So it's not all doom and gloom, but obviously just citing that it's not going to be an easy road ahead.
Yeah, which leads us neatly onto the car dealer story, which is also following on with Virtue. And the headline there is Virtue's Andy Goss re-elected as chairman of the board at Virtue, but sizable rebellion gives him cause for concern. So car dealer have looked closely at what happened during the meeting, and it said that Andy Goss kept his position as chairman, but in the words of car dealer, was made to sweat after nearly 28 million votes were cast against him at the AGM. And the rebels made up 17.2% of the ballot, while a further 26,000 votes were withheld. So some interesting developments there, and I'm not sure what's behind that.
No, the story doesn't go into it, does it? Of what is behind that. I know Andy Goss is a very very respected operator in the sector, and I think Robert's got a lot of time for him there. But I say I'm not so sure. I mean, that's a lot of votes, isn't
It
it?
is,
It's
yeah.
generally it's a lot of votes, and not necessarily that. Against Andy there, but that generally if that's I think that was what 17% of the votes. That's a lot of so we're not quite sure what the pushback is from those votes and the shareholders, but obviously a little bit of upset there within the team.
Yeah, and for further shareholder upset at Pendragon. So at Motor Trader, the headline is Pendragon shareholders vote against directors' 2021 pay. So this is Pendragon shareholders have voted against approving the annual report on directors' remuneration for 2021. So a total of 65.5% of shareholders voted against approval of directors' pay, while 34.5% approved. So, a significant majority there. And just flicking back to Car Dealer reported that Chief Exec Bill Berman actually held on to his position after being re-elected with a 64.9% vote. So some interesting developments here amongst shareholders of the PLCs.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of pressure on there at the
Yeah.
minute, and it does tend to come around every now and again, doesn't it? Where there is a lot of focus on this sort of the senior execs within some of these big group operators. But sticking with Pendragon and a sort of thing that came out this week, and many in the sector will know Malcolm Bailey. For his significant time at Pendragon PLC of just over, I think, 36 years. So he's leaving Pendragon. So he's put a statement out on LinkedIn this week saying that his time at Pendragon draws to a close at the end of the month, which I've had thoroughly enjoyed through the ups and downs of life in a public company, and I'm sure that brought a smirk to many faces with Pendragon's severe ups and downs
Yes.
through the decades of particular share prices. But and he's just wishing his colleagues and everyone that he's met along the journey the best wishes, and that he's going to put his attention to the next chapter and relishes the next chapter, whatever that may be. And he's had lots of comments on that, obviously wishing him the best. And obviously, I mean, there's one there from Dash Cup to wishing him good luck and saying that he enjoyed their time over the years doing deals for their respective companies, and he sort of cited him as one of the toughest negotiators he's ever dealt with. But but he does enjoy time with him off the pitch. So yeah, best of luck, Malcolm, with whatever the future does lie. But somebody moving on from sort of 37 years it would have been as his time at Pendragon there.
Yeah, and I would love to have been a fly on the wall during the negotiations between Malcolm and Dash there.
He
Talk
was,
about tough
yeah,
negotiators.
he was a tough negotiator. I'm aware of that as well through the times. But yeah, best of luck, Malcolm, with that one.
Yeah,
And
happy retirement now.
and the final story is over at Car Dealer that is looking at the top 25 of firms with best senior leadership.
Yeah, interesting one this. So Glassdoor reveals the automotive firms with best senior leadership. So within the story, because this is across all industries, it's not automotive specific, but a very strong showing within automotive because there's three companies listed within it: Car Shop, John Clark Motor Group, and Auto Traders. So starting with Car Shop, because that's actually the highest rated. So the Sytner owned used car supermarket was ranked 12th by Glassdoor within these rankings, followed by Auto Trader in 14th and John Clark Motor Group in 16th. And what makes this particularly interesting is that these ratings and rankings, they're all done by employees' anonymous input about their company's senior leaderships. And anyone familiar with Glassdoor, the Glassdoor website, it's a real insight into what employees think, good, bad, or ugly,
Mhm.
because everything gets posted. Everything is anonymous. So this is a very positive story that's come out of it. So, it does highlight that employees are happy in their job, which certainly ties in with some of the comments made by Steve Witten there in his Menable Moments about what happens when that's not the case. But it also takes into account things like work environment and the employer over the past year or so.
Yeah, they do start. Their strong senior leadership characteristics were identified by workers as being supportive, friendly, approachable, flexible, and dependable. So some key words there in that's been cited in this from Glassdoor. So again, kind of learnings for many maybe with this one. And see what's. But it's great to see that we've got some good operators that many of the listeners know very well, and they're obviously friends of the podcast doing well with this results. Yeah, so that's it for this week, isn't it, Curtis?
It
So
is.
very much on the latest economics and the impacts that's having in terms of consumer confidence, and looks like some of the senior leaders are under a little bit of pressure at some of the larger groups.
Yes, and I'm sure we'll return to the theme of some of these stories over the coming weeks and months. But that's all for now. You've been listening to the weekly Motor Trade Radio podcast powered by eBay Motors Group. Many thanks for joining us for all the chatter that matters. We're back again next week. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.